It's great to see you all. Thank you all for coming. What I'd love to do is just go around and each of us in turn voice first that which touches you the most deeply in the sense of in your own life or in the world or anywhere in between. Where's the pain? Where is the heartbreak? Where is the most sense of compassion evoked that draws the greatest sense of feeling? And then what is something, the most recent thing that has touched you that felt like a real breath of fresh air in the face of whatever is the challenge that has your broad awareness? What is the thing that have felt like a whisper or a prayer or some semblance of a balm or an answer even to that? What's that thing that's caused some spark of joy or hopefulness? So I'll just leave it to us to take a moment, and whoever feels called, go ahead and jump in. Thank you.
Happy to go first. First, Suzanne, hello. I haven't seen you in so long.
Oh, and Alan, 20 years ago we worked together.
It's been such a long time. It's great to see you. I think the last time was at your kitchen table and near my folks' house. Um, okay, so mine are actually both the same thing. I was thinking about them today. The metaphor one uses cathedral, sort of the cathedral that we are, that this is metaphorically. But I was thinking about two people in my neighborhood. I live in a really rural little town, and there's a little boy that he and I befriended each other in 2020 during COVID. His mom was pregnant with her second child, and she was on bed rest. And he had nothing to do but hang out with the middle-aged lady around the corner. And we would go like clamming for scallops. So I guess that's scalloping. And like he would just hang out a lot. We like got rid of poltergeists in my barn. And he was a talkative, adorable little boy. And now he's like a preteen and he dyed his hair hot pink. And it's just like the beauty of him and like just like how fast the time has gone, like how ephemeral it is. It's broke me like wide open today. So it's both like the pain point and just like the total beauty of time and his all of ours, but his like his movement, his grace. And similar was along the same line was my neighbor across the street, who we also became friends during that time. And she's about 20 years older than I am. And she brought me this huge Joe Pye weed today because she was thinning out her yard. It's a native species around here. And it's just like this really gorgeous moment. She had it in her wheelbarrow, and I got my husband, and we were dealing with like navigating getting the Joe Pye weed out of the wheelbarrow and splitting it in two to plant it. And again, it was just like so beautiful and like so heartbreaking. Like that plant has been here a very long time since it's native to Maine. Will be here a long time. Past me, my lifetime and hers, and my husband certainly. So yeah. Thanks. Thanks for that invitation.
I will go. Mm. I'm 83 and I work a lot with elders. And I was in a meeting yesterday of people I've been working with voluntarily for several years now. And what broke my heart is how unprepared we all are to face what is coming. the collapse that is coming. I'm reading Jim Bendel's book and Big Wheatley and Malcolm Dowd, focusing on that for some of the things I'm trying to share with a group of elders who are on a regenerative elder process. And the difficulty of opening one's eyes to what is coming. Nothing is certain, but there are things ahead of us for which particularly elders should be prepared. Everyone. So that's one aspect, and it's just lingering to me, and how much importance to give to that, and how is it possible to actually work on reducing the pain or that will come, individual, collective pain, if it's possible. And on the light side, I was on my bike this morning in the streets of Portland, and the leaves are turning. It's not a very sunny day here, and I go on a bike ride every day. It's a way for me to it's a very silent bike, so I can just take in what is there, and I go in very quiet streets. And there was a sense of communion with nature, which is turning, changing, preparing itself for the winter. And so I see a parallel between my own sense of what is coming, what's already underway, and the ability to both accept it and open to the beauty of it. So that's where I am.
I'll try and build on that. Brother Kabir sent me a link to an interview by Daniel, I can't pronounce his last name, but he was basically talking about the meta crisis. It was a 50-minute interview, and I found myself getting more and more depressed the more and more I listened to it, because he pretty clearly laid out just how messed up we are. So I had a sense of, well, things are pretty bleak. Like, why try? Well, what's the hope? And at the end of his talk, he shifted a bit and began to say, so if you're not depressed by hearing this or by knowing this information, then you're sort of messed up. You're not connected with yourself. This is really depressing information. And I'm going, well, okay, so at least I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. I'm depressed. But I still don't know what the hell I'm going to do with this or with my grandkids relative to this. And then he snuck in a couple things at the very end. One is, he said, well, you can do something about that. One is, instead of going to your emails or your data streams that are filled by information that is sort of determined by the different chatbots or whatever that sort of maintain the current framework, you could fill that with something else, with things that are more useful, that which speaks to alternatives to the current reality. I'm going, oh, that's a good idea. And then he ended it by saying, so what if we changed our perspective from one of it's sort of hopeless, we've really screwed ourselves royally on this, to, we actually had the capacity to figure out how to split the damn atom, and then how to actually fuse the atom. That made huge changes. So if we have the capacity to make those kinds of discoveries, don't we have the capacity, if we work together, if we choose to put our intelligence to that end, don't we have the capacity to find a way out of this mess? And I found myself feeling a little less depressed, a little less hopeless, in a sense of, oh, there's a light at the end of this tunnel, if we just choose to look at it. So thank you, Brother Kabir. It's still working me.
And I'm too getting so much information from reputable sources, I think, that are totally depressing. And one today that really struck me was somebody writing about invasive species and then saying, but we humans are the most invasive species that the planet has ever seen. Now, so if we try with every good thing we have, intelligence and ingenuity and care and love, it may not be enough, because we really have messed up the planet so much that for me anyway, there is very little hope. And where it hurts most is like yours, thinking of my grandchildren and other young children that are born at this very minute, and what kind of world we leave to them. That is just totally, every time I'm with my grandchildren, I play, of course I play along, I'm joking, we're playing games, we're doing creative things, and yet in my heart, I weep. And my own way, or my own comfort, is usually nature. The cycles of life and death, the inevitable cycles, not linear. You know, like our whole cultures are all linear, upward and onward, better and better, all of that, but just cyclical. It's natural. And talking about death, you know, and being old and having to contemplate our ends as well, that, yeah, I'm trying to face that by teaching the lifeboat again, and really exploring what it means, how we need to be able to face death in order to live fully, to live joyfully, just for being here. What else do we have? We have no choice. No, we're here. All 5 of us are here, whether we want to or not. We were born, and here we are, and we will die. I don't think there is another alternative. So can we, just for the fact of being alive, make the most of it? Whether there is whatever is behind the horizon. That's only mildly comforting, but it is giving me some spirit to not just give up.
The thing recently that really touched my heart was watching that same interview that Dan, you mentioned, the Daniel Schmachtenberger. And I've been listening to him for some years now, and I know that his father passed this year earlier, and that after that, the interviews I've seen of him since then, on my sense is there's something a bit more raw about his presentation. He's going a little bit more, he's like, kind of like, if there was any sugar coating before, it's kind of gone now. It's not that he's callous or unkind, but he's just kind of more plainly, hey, there's real pain here. And I'm always in such admiration of his mind. He seems to be an incredible exemplar of both keen intelligence, but a softness as well that doesn't bring with it a sense of arrogance. It really feels like he's connected to the feelings behind the intellect. And as I watched him talk, he was at a major investment conference, and the opening question was really kind of like, "Oh, so what's your takeaway here? What are you thinking?" And his opening line was really like that all of these people, all of you good people, are going to leave this conference, and all of this information about the state of our condition and the direness of this circumstance is going to leave you when you first scroll for a minute. You're going to leave with intentions, and it's going to go into the abstract and fade away again. And as I watched that conversation, the thing that really touched me is how much he's carrying as a person who really, there's just no hyperbole in anything that I've heard him say. It's really just, I'm looking at the data and I'm repeating it to you, and I'm able to stitch it together in a complex and comprehensive way, and it doesn't make a nice tapestry. It's a very concerning picture that emerges. And the way that he shows up again and again and presents this, he said, how uncomfortable he was with public speaking. The other thing that he spoke to when he first got on there was that asked him to speak, and he's like, well, first of all, the lights are bright and I can't see anybody. I can't see any of these people to whom I'm supposed to be talking. And you could tell that there was he felt the loss in that.
Mm-hmm.
And just the dutifulness and the willingness that he shows up to tell this story again and again with that insight that it's just in our nature to forget it and to be distracted and to move on and to go shopping and do something else. And that he keeps doing that. That really broke my heart a bit, just how much that person is carrying about that we're not all carrying about. It felt like such a generosity. And the thing that gave me a sense of hopefulness, and I'll use that word, because this question has really, really gotten like a dog that just shakes, And so in everything I see, and everything I look at, I'm like hearing the scent of this. And I was listening to an interview with Tyson, who's an Aboriginal person in Australia, who never sugarcoats anything. And it was very blunt, but he says, and this is something he said that I don't really fully understand it yet, but he asserted it, and so I'm going to take him on faith that it has some basis in fact and has some meaning. But he said something about when two systems that have been separated come back together, there's a burst of vigor, and there's a Cambrian explosion of energy. And my kind of deepest prayer in all of this is that the colonial cultures of the world will find again the indigenous cultures of the world, and that these two systems can come back together in a peaceful and a harmonic way. And that the idea that should that occur, that there might be this natural evolutionary burst of vigor, which I take as, heightened and short-lived, and then this explosion, this Cambrian explosion, unpredictable, inexplicable diversity that would be just exactly the kind of thing that we would need to get through this state that we're in. We would have to have some radical good fortune and some unforeseen diversity of creativity. And that gives me hope, because I do feel like there's something beautiful at work in nature that hasn't been fooled by us. And though we might not make it, I think we just might as well. And so that leads me into the invitation, and just, again, thank you all for that ritual sharing of hearts. And I'm just, for me, have to respond. And that was one of the things that Daniel said. I really liked his affirmation of that was, if you're not depressed by this,
You're not
you need to is get yourself together, because you're either sociopathic or broken.
Mm.
Once you've got some semblance of togetherness, you need to recognize that responding to this has got to be your highest priority. And you need to try something, and when it doesn't work, you need to wonder how, and then you need to try again. And that's what I feel like I'm brought to. And so this conversation is really me begging for insight onto what can one person do, what can 5 people do, what can anybody, what can we do that honors the earth, but stretches ourselves in all of our techno-terrorism and intellectual devastation. Like, where is this synergy of ourselves as we are that can respond, as you say, Dan, can like meet this time with enough humility and enough compassion and enough creativity? There has to be something we can try. Has to be something I can try. Speaking for myself, I feel that like ragged with it. And so thank you all for coming to feel that with me, engage here together.
As you brought up the indigenous perspective, this is the theme we've taken in the program 9-week voluntary activities, called it exploration, is to explore the indigenous worldview and all its complementarity or contrast with the modern European or Western worldview. And I've not heard him, the Australian mention, say that, though I've seen his name. But indeed, there's a hope that as we open up to other ways of seeing and being, particularly with nature and with others, knowing that we have that in our genetic heritage, all of us. I was a Celt in Europe at some time in another life, so we don't have to look too far, maybe far in terms of number of years, and that's the intention we have, is that I initiated this about a year ago, and going through this process for the first time in the spring and doing it again now in the fall, the sense that revisiting what it means to be human, to be fully human, and what it means to be one with nature instead of treating nature as an object. How deep, and then what it means for interaction as older people with younger people. So that's what we are exploring. trying to go as deep as we can in how much regenerative it can be, and how troubling it can be as well. Regeneration is not easy. And so I echo in that way what you are saying, Kabir, and find that, and there's so much richness in that heritage from all over the world, not just Australia, not just North America, but also Europe in the old days. That and I link it for me with a mysticism that is being reawakened in me, that was there in my youth, but that I probably put aside for so long. And that direct communication with, I was hearing Almas talk about love. What is love? What is the essence of love? Not just sentimental love last night. And anyway, I don't want to go much further, but all these things are interconnected, and they are wonderful synchronicities opening as I put myself on that wavelength.
So I'm just reflecting on the last experience that I had with you, Kabir, in the Generating Transformational Change program. It was the Hogan Dialogues. And it, as I recall, it wasn't any of our idea to do that. It was a Navajo elder who, at least in his report, talked about, visiting with his ancestors and the spirits, and they directed him to offer that to us. So I'm thinking, our last experience was connecting with Indigenous experience. Mm-hmm. So, maybe this is why. Maybe it was preparation for this moment. I had a very distinct memory of getting into a bit of an argument with him over a break, where we chatted about the agreements that we made prior to the beginning of the Hogan Dialogues, which was that we would be totally focused on the here and now. We wouldn't be doing anything or talking about anything other than the here and now. And I think it was on our very first break, we got into the white folk got into a conversation about a presentation or a conference that one of us was going to. And we got into that conversation while Larry is sitting on the couch in his house. Listen, and he sort of endured that for, must have been 15, 20 minutes. And finally he got up and said, I can't believe it. I thought we had an agreement that you were going to be present here and now, and that you have broken that agreement. You have broken that contract. And this has been my experience. And it was like what you're doing, Kabir. It's like, holy shit, you're right. So it was like a meeting of the real meaning, which continues to work me.
Alon, you referenced that return to a mysticism. And I have had a similar experience where that was really present in my youth. And it was put aside or taken aside or moved aside, or became aside for many, many years. And it's just recently, in the last month or two, that's really kind of bubbled up as a kind of a prayer that I'd like to rejoin the integrity of that union. And Dan, you evoked this being present and the sacredness of that and the violation of departing from that. And it struck me shortly after I think I introduced the conversation today that I had been out of time. I was kind of so anticipating being a good host and being a good steward that I went searching in my mind for what was that thing that really touched me and evoked that sense of compassion. But if I was being honest and if I was being present, the thing that most recently touched me in that deep and painful way was your ceremonial sharing, Suzanne. Your description of a grandmother playing with her grandchildren and feeling the hurt of their potential doom and smiling and laughing and evoking all of the vitality of the youth. And that really, I was so grateful for that insight and for that to come close to that. And it struck me that I had missed it as really, it was that. That's the last thing that really came across and just rolled over me. So thank you again for sharing that. Dan, for helping me hear that clear admonition from Larry again, that this is ceremony. Right now, this time of our lives is ceremony. Be present. Yeah, thank you.
I'm never sure whether I should be sad that I don't remember things, even that. And I call it now, I've learned the term forgettery. I don't have a memory anymore, I have a forgettery. And so I'm grateful with whatever I might have said or could still say to others. If it lands and supports, I'm happy. But I don't even know, what to say sometimes. When we're talking about Indigenous folks, my experience in Indigenous cultures, both Africa and Australia, has been that they very much feel that now that finally the voices like Junka Portas and some others get heard, the West and the typical colonial approaches to, what's the word they use? Take that wisdom, so that it's not, it's just, we can have that too. We can just expand our repertoire and add that. And it's hard to dash somehow the hope that some people get from thinking, maybe we can, I don't know what the word would be, assimilate or take Indigenous wisdom, which also, as many similarities as it has, it also has vast differences among the different Indigenous folks of what fundamentally they believe. But anyway, I always feel I end up being the rain. Maybe that would be nice. Rain, a live and sings up, no, what they call the cold bath water or something in when people are hopeful. And then I come with my critiques or caution, not critiques, cautions, mostly cautions. It's too easy to take these things and fully realize what it actually would mean. But if you would like a ceremony, I have a meditation that I've written with Indigenous folks as the main leader that I would share with you if you're interested later on. It's a good circle. I call it the fire, I forget even the most basic words. When you sit around the fire in nature, whatever. Anyway, it's an offering. I can, now that we're in this topic, that I would be happy to read to you. I can find it on my computer. But it's all so complex. I just feel inadequate to even fully understand all the complexities, intertwined things that are going on. And I don't want to yet give up. That's the thing. And just say I'm too old and too full of forgettery and all of that to not try something. And in the end, laugh, you know, the whole thing about cosmic laughter. In the end, that's probably what's left that I can hope for. Maybe it will be cosmic crying. I don't know, but yes, enough.
Something about the complexity that you mentioned, Suzanne, it is working me. Like I can hold complexity as, oh, I can't do diddly squat until I understand the complexity. Like first is I have to understand it, and then I'll know what to do with it. And another way of holding it, which I'm not that great at, is sort of being in the complexity, appreciating the complexity. Not that I'm going to understand it, but I'm going to be in the mix. In the way that I can be sane in the mix is to be curious. Like, well, look at that. Well, isn't that interesting? Well, what about this? And when I'm getting that place, and I found myself chuckling and going, "Oh, that's complex as hell, and that's kind of bizarre." And so there's something like how I hold that complexity contributes to my capacity or willingness to engage in the moment. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm struck by feeling like inadequate to even like respond to the question, because I feel like I'm like this bundle of paradoxes. So it's like I reject scrolling, and yet I'm equally also like collecting information, and I'm definitely like the algorithms have narrowed me into certain boxes, and I'm viewing certain things, and I have certain points of interest. So like how do I hold those at the same time? And then I'm deeply curious and really putting a lot of attention on creativity for the sake of creativity, and yet then I have really strong opinions. Yeah, it's just very overwhelming. And I do really notice that when I turn off the computer and go outside in the sunshine or in the rain, that does a lot here, and dig in the garden or go for a walk, like that feels really darn great. And that's also then, but not a solution, but like there's something like some powerful medicine there. So again, just paradox after paradox after paradox. Yeah. And I also want to say, like, I went to that CC gathering in Toronto, outside of Toronto a couple weeks ago, and there was a real yearning. People had to be making a difference. And yet at the same time, paradox, I heard people really endeavoring to make a difference. So I heard both the yearning, but simultaneously like that they're actually trying to make a difference. So again, very interesting paradox. Like, yeah.
I find that what is helping me at this time is to deepen my understanding of my own complexity as a human being, and simplicity probably at some time. But particularly looking at the Enneagram, and we are introducing it as a way for our little group to communicate at a different level, being aware of the compulsions that may be there, and that there is something beyond that. So I I've just become more aware and trying to do that in the moment. Like now, of my tendency as a 5 to want to connect all the things together and see how they fit, and the other one is just to abandon myself to the experience of the I don't know how to even call it, but the love that is latent, that is there as a liquefied light or something like this, that is accessible at any moment and has nothing to do with this, or not much to do with this cognitive capacity. So I'm aware of the path that is still ahead of me, and possibly some others who are a bit like me, to rediscover that simplicity, that deep living impulse that is there. And my sense is that it's a very important ingredient in the acceptance of collapse as a possibility. Not everything is going to collapse. Not that sense of deep connection with life, deep trust in life. At least I can speak for myself. That's what holds me. And the being, the letting go inside, that enables me to be listening deeper and possibly becoming more of a vehicle through which some of these things can be expressed. Being deeply connected to Source. And for me, that sense of being in the moment, in the present, is very key for that. In the meditation and in the conversation also.
Getting a river metaphor really shaping me, this like being laughter, being present to a complexity that is in its nature. One of the reasons it's complex is because it's new every moment. And so that it, like, being present to that, I open my mouth and the song of the river comes out through me. And that there is that deeper flow that is quite undying. And but if that river has crafted this canyon, has made this beautiful landscape flowing to the ocean and up to the sky and back into the springs, that maybe there's an element of that faithfulness to knowing the promise of beauty, in a sense. That the rapids and the whitewater and the falls will recreate order in a new way, and that in every moment we're all a part of that. There's something about that being in the moment and that reverence for the long arcs of time and the willingness to be the song. Something is driving me in that metaphor. Thank you, all of you.
Alan, when you said about believing in the source, my inner reaction was, well, I don't believe in a source.
Mhm.
Can I be helpful? Can I be in the here and now, even if I don't believe in a source? I mean, that's just the thing. And I think, yes, I don't need necessarily, I wished I had a belief in a source, but I've never managed to find it. And I've also come to accept that it's okay not to have it, not to have a purpose, not to have a belief in an ulterior being or a source or whatever you want to call it. And to do, I like what the thing, simplicity after complexity. When you've done all the complex stuff you can, it is also in some ways living is fairly simple. You wake up in the morning, you take your first breath, then you think, oh, I need a tea or a coffee, and so on through the day. And at some point you feel tired and you go to bed. It's not very complicated, particularly when you are privileged like I think we're all 5 of us are in some ways, because we can do that. There's it's open to us. I can go to bed earlier too if I like to, or not go to bed at all. But some people don't have those choices. So I don't know. I'm trying to be useful. But then again, because I'm a skeptic of my own things, I wonder whether writing that book that I'm writing with a colleague and it's ready, we just need a publisher, is actually a useful thing for humanity or for the bigger purpose. Who knows? What it did do is both of us, he's an Australian, and I had enormous joy and fun and still do doing that work. Maybe that's enough, even if it never sees the light of day. So these are my questions always.
Okay, I'm not sure if this is going to be useful, but I just had the image of you sitting down with your grandchildren and reading the book to them. Or if the book is too written to the adults, that you write another book just for kids and then sit down and read that book to the kids, to your grandkids. I'm just imagining that could be a very delightful experience.
It is written for lay people. It's not an academic book. It has all kinds of lovely things, from love story to a monster to, but it is for, I wouldn't say I would give it to real young kids, but it is available to, I would say, a teenager, certainly. And it's about adult development theory, clad in critters, because that's where I have the most affinity with nature. So, yes, thank you. I think it is meant to be available as a story, just as a story you could read, or it could be informative in a more deep way, but it doesn't have to. And it gave me joy. What else can we gather? Where do we gather joy? In nature? Seeing a butterfly, seeing a dust speckle being lit up through a lamp or a streak of sun. And there you go, you smile, you laugh. And a beautiful pattern I saw first, your background, Kabir. It almost made me cry because it made me remember lighting candles in the church for the loved ones that were gone. And I still do that when I'm in a Catholic church. And it's that image of the many, many, many candles lighting up life. So gathering joy wherever one can, that's part of what we can do. And then share it, you're right, Dan. Share it with the little ones, sharing with our spouses, sharing just wherever we can.
Told a story in our last engagement about discovering that I could want only that which I have. And one of the things that's really driving at me in this question is the inquiry about what are the lowest common denominators? What are the things that bind all of humanity together in a way that we all appreciate? Some kinds of universal values or something like this. And when you spoke about the joy, I was first a little conflicted because it's one of the heartbreaks for me is seeing people get wrapped up in the pursuit of happiness to the deference and ignorance of the impacts of what brings them happiness, or the opiate effect of the happiness that drives them away from the suffering. And what struck me, so I started to ask, where's the happiness? I mean, not that we should like everybody go to work and be happy about it, but there's something about like, if I know from my experience that if I'm practicing bravery, or I'm practicing humility, or I'm practicing love, I'm really aware that there's some deep value that feels, to me anyway, in this moment or that moment, universal. That there's a real joyfulness and a playfulness that can come about if I feel I'm kind of testing my edges for how truly can I embody or express that thing. And I just wonder about like, what if there were a story, a human story, that invited us all to be our best selves in a way, and as a foundation upon which we build all of our diversity and creativity, but be our best selves in the way that we can see each other and recognize our best selves in each other in this common DNA level kind of language. And could that set a deep tone of joyfulness and happiness for all of us as we meet this enormous time that seems very, very certainty. And I use that word with humility, but it feels like certainty that, oh, this is going to hurt and there's going to be a lot of terrible things. But if that's the game, if that's where we are, it's like, well, we're all going to die someday, but apparently not just now. Is there a place to find the joy in meeting that by some real practice of being human that isn't just distraction or looking the other way? Seems like that's embodied in some of the places that you've described. You're just practicing some basic human goodness, and in that finding joyfulness, whether it's in gardening or tending the children or creating the beauty, the stories. I saw a bright little hummingbird just come and land on the branch just outside my window, just here, moments before we started today. And I noticed it, as I always do, joyfully to see a hummingbird. But something about what we were just sharing a moment before I spoke, somewhere in there, it was evoked for me like, oh, isn't that really sweet that it came so close to this thing that has so much meaning to me and so much heartfulness.
I have two anecdotes, and I'm sure you've heard at least one of them. Everybody has. There's the story of the Hmong people, who there were a bunch of them who were resettled in Minnesota, I think, at one point in the 80s or 90s. And the story, as I remember it, was something like this: that a whole bunch of social workers and therapists on hand to help these people deal with, obviously integrating into Western culture, but also to deal with the trauma of Civil War, right, and what they dealt with. And a woman was interviewed who was a social worker, and she said what they wanted to talk about was like, well, this one, like, cheated on me, or my husband cheated me with that one, and like all this very, like, like personal stuff, and like, I liked this one and he was like me, or like we had a fight about blah blah blah. And I remember in the anecdotes, and like the social worker was really surprised by that. And so I'm always reminded of like, for myself, that what is my capacity for the sort of sphere of suffering that I can actually like confront or hold without it becoming like an abstraction. So it's like beauty, right? Like, how much beauty can I actually like ingest before I pop out of it and talk about beauty? So something like that is like a parallel for me with suffering. And then the other one is just a little quote. Tip O'Neill was quoted as saying, like, if you live long enough, life will break your heart. It's one of my mother's favorite quotes, and I think of it often. Like, yeah. So those just both came to mind. Yeah.
I was reflecting, Susan, on what you said about source. I was brought up as a Catholic, and at least the first 10, 15 years of my life. And with that sense of reverence and distance, there's someone up there. And the way I use source now is source is in here too. So that's probably where I see my own evolution, is that the source is not outside of me, it's in me too. And so it may not be the best word, but for me, it conveys that sense of that wonderful aliveness that will continue probably beyond my own life, but in a different form. So that's the way I was using it. So I was not referring to an external.
Yes. So, and élan vital
Élan vital, yes.
is, of course, part of what makes me keep going as well. Whether I want, again, it's part of what we are. We can't really help it. And it will animate probably any other times, and even if the human species or many others go kaput, that is still in the universe. There seems to be something like that keeps going, that keeps, or the image we had about the two things coming together and creating this new fire, or new élan vital, a new form of thing. I can all imagine and welcome and say, yes, that would be wonderful. And good company is wonderful too.
Yes.
The simple fact of good company and not being alone with it's very hard to keep the elan when you're alone, or you feel alone. So some of the efforts we make is to connect and hang out with others and learn from others and listen to others in order to keep our fires burning.
Mm-hmm.
Campfire is the title of the thing that I was thinking about.
I had a question, like an inquiry, which would be, back to that suffering piece, like how much suffering can I, hold before I dissociate? And what would be the practice for being able to, if it's even a worthwhile practice, or for us to actually be able to stay present, to larger and larger bands of suffering?
There are meditation practices that help with that. But I don't know whether that, again, I feel always privileged. I'm not actually, most of the time, I'm not in a place where I read about it, I see it on movies, suffering in other countries and the devastation of war and all of that, but I'm not actually in it. So I feel do I even have a right to have solutions? I'm sure you have similar, kind of reactions. Some religions would say that being alive as humans is suffering. I'm not sure I buy that one either, but there's all kinds of things around it. And in little ways, when one hurts, what do you do when you hurt? If you hurt yourself or you're hurt, how do you deal with that? In the instant, in the here and now, when it happens to you. Different modalities, you curse. Sometimes
You cry.
You cry, you scratch.
You hit pillows with things.
And sometimes you can go into it and really go into it.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's, yeah.
And so then if we take this like really big pressing issue around the meta crisis, it's like I come back to that full circle to the question, like the inquiry, like what can we do about what can we do? Cry, curse, get creative, participate. Again, these are all questions. I have no idea, right? But yeah.
Except all suffering is also a connector, I would think, to me or to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
I can empathize. I can really, really feel suffering of others too. Absolutely. And then I feel more connected.
Mm-hmm.
That was what I just heard was we cry out.
Oh, yeah.
Allows us to hear one another.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives us a place to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and from my own experience over the last years, I just know, at a certain point, the suffering got so intense for me that I cried out. And people came. And they didn't solve my injury, my hurt, my pain, but they came in all their different ways and were present. And that was enormous. And it remains enormous. And I cried out for this conversation, and you've come. And it's enormous. And it's like, what can we do? Well, guess what? We can all be there for someone, because it doesn't take more than just being there. I mean, it's the minimum, and it's enormous. And it doesn't make no difference. It makes a world of difference. Mm-hmm. Our children cry out, and we go to them. And we're all children here.
Mhm.
I'm finding since I, moved to this small town that being a good neighbor, whatever good quote unquote means, being like a participant in my neighborhood with people and helping out and being helped out has like significantly enriched my experiences of being human. Like I can feel the connection between us. Like I'm actually thinking of them and them and them and her behind me. And we have like like a little reliance on one another. It was really good.
And the boy you spoke of earlier.
Oh, it's delicious.
Your point, Jane, I still have in mind the phrase, the sentence that Meg Wheatley keeps repeating
Mm.
in her book and in what she teaches. Whatever the question is, community is the answer.
Mm.
And it seems that what we're talking at the beginning, the adversity that we may face, may be a very strong dimension of what will be needed. Community and compassion.
Mhm.
Passion for self and others, and community, that sense that we can't work this out by ourselves. Yeah. So we've been trying in our neighborhood here in Portland. Mostly my wife has. My wife Elise has tried to connect with neighbors, and especially neighbors who have dogs and walk them in the street. People do not communicate necessarily very easily, but the animals are a good vehicle to start having a conversation. And I'm encouraging her. It is not something that comes naturally to me to engage in a conversation just about what is there. But my sense is, and that's what we're trying to form with the elders we're working with, a sense of community. Yes, it's initially mostly a virtual community, online, because they come from all over, not just the US, but the world. But moving toward a local community where people can care for each other, have compassion for each other. I think that's going to be, for me, an essential aspect of what's coming. And again, as an Enneagram 5, it doesn't come to me spontaneously. I really have to stretch myself. But I sense that it's a very important ingredient of continuing to love life as it presents itself. Yeah.
Love that.
And isn't part of loving life also loving the vessel that has that life in it?
Mm. Yes.
Appreciating it for even if it hurts, even if it gets forgettery, even of all those things. Still being grateful for having it with all its senses. And
I dream that if we make it through this time, on the other side, we'll have a really clear recognition of the community of life in all of its bodies. And the idea of listening for that crying out and
Mhm.
shouting out.
Mhm.
I think maybe you've all heard the donut economics story of on the interior, like the simple basic human needs, and where are we failing to meet those, and on the exterior, what are the planetary boundaries and what are our thresholds are we exceeding there? And it strikes me that that lens is a new tool for listening. And we can go to that. We can just, oh, I hadn't thought to listen there. And what does it even mean if I just then, species extinction? I don't know, do something. But I can go there. I can actually just spend a minute with that crying out and just let it touch me and let my heart open to that. And then maybe that's all I do. Maybe then maybe I notice one more place to listen. Maybe I learn all the different ways of listening to my child, and then the trees, and then the animals, and then the culture that I don't know. And then I just learn that there's this common human thread of listening. And I find joyfulness in discovering the ways I didn't know how to listen yesterday. And I find myself tripping over today.
So I'm thinking that my image of the light at the end of the tunnel that I was referencing as we began, it was like a teeny tiny light. Things are pretty damn bleak, and it's a teeny light. What if this conversation that we're having now is contribute to that teeny tiny light? And then I go, and what if we're not the only ones having this kind of conversation? And I'm thinking of images that I've seen from, I guess, the space station or satellites, where you're looking down on the globe, and there are all of these points of light all over the place. And I'm going like, whoa, like, what if that's what's happening on the planet now? What if there are these kind of conversations that are happening all over the place? Then my sense of the degree of light at the end of the tunnel gets a whole lot bigger than what I was holding at the beginning of this conversation. And it may not be coherent yet, like it's not pulled into a singular point of light. It's spread out over the planet. But just like, what if there's a lot of these kind of conversations happening? And then I'm thinking, oh yeah, and what the hell would it be like if we were to gather them all around the campfire? Like, what would that conversation be like? Woo! I want Suzanne to be sharing her story at that campfire.
Are you ready for that?
Well, I don't know yet, but I'm kind of curious to find out.
It's just a thing that I read to introduce an Indigenous speaker. Let me find it quickly. Normally, I adjust meditations like that to the particular context. This is an introduction to a Indigenous speaker, so it's not quite that. And close that. Take a few breaths and explain to me what still silence is. I immediately reacted and said, would be a loud silence be? The first slide.
Deafening.
Deafening silence. No, that I know what it is. Okay. Take a few deep, relaxing breaths at your natural pace. Nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing not to do. When you are still, close your eyes and imagine this. It is late summer and the sun is going down behind the tree horizon, The air is stirring gently as the night approaches and the warmth of the afternoon fades into the cool night. We are gathered around a big campfire to celebrate this year's harvest and to express our gratitude for the abundant gifts of nature. We are deeply aware of the changing seasons, the cycles of birth, growth, decline, and death that have been part of life since time immemorial. We are sitting on logs in a clearing of old-growth forest, in a meadow, spacious enough for our large human tribe. People have come from far and wide to participate in a sacred harvest ceremony and renew their vows of responsible stewardship. Present are the elders, grandparents, mothers and fathers, and many children. The littlest ones are nestled in their mother's laps or nursing from the life-giving fountain of the breast. Older children sit on the grass and listen. They have been taught since babyhood to be quiet and pay attention and learn from what they experience in a sacred meeting. Now pay attention to the presence of other kin, the 4-legged, 6-legged, 8, and the 1,000-legged ones. And what about our winged and stationary relatives? Can you acknowledge your dependence on all the creatures, including viruses and bacteria, who live in and around and above us? Tall pines and ancient oak trees stand guard around the clearing as they have for centuries. They have encircled our ancestors just as they embrace us now. If you listen very carefully, you can hear them murmur among themselves and tell the story of our people and humans' arrival on the planet. In their tree rings, they chronicle their own joys and sorrows, periods of hot summers and icy winters, illness and recovery. They talk about their concerns about a world in distress. They communicate with each other in complex ways through their root rhizomes, chemical signals, and the wind and the weather. The adults in turn reminisce about times gone by, of surviving cycles of prosperity and hardship, feast and famine, displacement, and the bitter loss of former homes. They also comment on the current threats to our planet. Yet based on their experience and resourcefulness, they're hopeful that together we can build a new, more sustainable village. Global village, actually says. Everyone watches the fire in the centers in silence and gratitude for this one more day of life we celebrate together. Now listen softly. The setting we are in is alive with sounds. A cricket is chirping under a log, the gentle hum of the breeze, and now the crackling of the campfire erupting with plumes of embers. Notice also the smell of the burning fire, quite sharp, and right now overpowering everything else that gifts us with its fragrance, pine trees, aromatic grasses and wildflowers, even the different smell of each other. When the fire dies down a bit, you register the faint perfume of a wild rose bush behind you, resplendent with heart-shaped pink petals. Now you're noting the buzz of a nectar-gathering bumblebees in the blossoms. They follow an ancient agreement between nectar-producing plants and pollinators. Miraculously, there are innumerable such contracts and kinships in nature that sustain everyone involved in mutual support. Can you feel the touch of the breeze and how the grasses tickle your feet? Can you hear what your toes are telling the grasses and to each other? Can you fathom all the zillions of communications that go on in your body and with your surroundings? Can you feel the heat from the fire on your face and hands and the slight chill in your back? So many senses, so many ways of listening and sharing. Part of the wonders of being alive. You are calm, open and alert, and deeply listening with gratitude. You feel welcome and safe within the bosom of this tribe. To end the evening, you share the traditional Harvest Fest meal with everyone, a reward for tending to the land and each other with love and the profound knowledge of our interdependence. When the sharing is done, all help in cleaning up, so no trace of having borrowed the celebration remains. You say your goodbyes, and when you're ready, come back to this meeting room, feeling reanimated with life, energy, hope, and joy. It sort of captures all the things we have been touched upon. The indigenous perspective, that all sentient beings, that there are longer cycles, that the community, the sharing, all of that, yes. And sharing that after it lifted my spirits.
Thank you.
To be continued.
Yeah.